everyone, this is Liz Brassaw, the Chief Flight Instructor at Thrust Flight, and today I'm with Jarrod.
Hey guys, I'm Jarrod Roberts, Flight Instructor at Thrust Flight and an airline pilot.
And today we're going to talk about the top ways to make your flight training expensive. The first one that comes to mind for me is your training frequency. If you come train once a week or come train 5 times a week, the amount you're going to pay for your training varies greatly because you forget in between lessons, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something I saw in my training even was repeating a lot of stuff, right? So you've already gotten to the point where you're good on something and then now you're having to bring yourself back up to that level. So it's like you're doing everything twice and taking kind of 2 steps back to take 1 step forward every time. So
yeah, you think about how long you stay in training as well. Students that come train once a week will maybe be in that particular stage of training for multiple months. You know, when I see private pilots that train only on Saturdays and Sundays and one of those days gets weathered out and now they're training for private pilot for 6 months, that's a lot to pay for as well. Right?
Yeah. It's pretty, I think, impossible to retain that amount of new knowledge for any student if you're only giving it 1 to 2 days a week. Understandably, that's what works for some people in their schedule, but ideally 3, 4, 5 days a week is what you need to be able to retain all the information, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Another one that comes to mind for me is if you're learning your ground school in the airplane. So this isn't always the student's fault, but let's say the first time you're learning a skill, it's in the aircraft. Typically, you don't pick it up as good as you would have if you did it on the ground. And so you actually spend more time going over the same topic. Maybe that flight ended up being 20 minutes longer because you had to have the instructor explain it twice because you hadn't learned it before you got in the plane. Or maybe you also had to have a ground lesson on this afterwards or have a second flight where you reviewed that topic because it wasn't learned before we got into the airplane. The airplane is a really hard place to learn ground school.
Right. It is notoriously a horrible classroom, the airplane. Of course, that's the only place we have for some things like performing maneuvers. You must be in an airplane for things like that. But a good and experienced instructor, I think, will provide a good briefing for something that requires a lot of technical or kind of like repetitive steps for maneuvers and things like that you're going to do in the airplane. And it's even partly on the student, right? If you've been doing your homework and you haven't, understood a part of it, I think that, even asking for a briefing or making sure you get all your ducks in a row and every misunderstanding explained before you jump into the airplane, so it's not like, what was that? Well, I didn't understand that ever. You should get that all out of the way before you get in the airplane, if you can, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've had students who've told me, I'm just not gonna get around to homework at home, so whatever we need to do, we're gonna do here together. And I'm happy to work with them through that, but it's gonna cost more money, right? Because work they do at home, there's no charge for an instructor, there's no charge for a resource, an airplane, a simulator, right? It's time that they could have spent to prevent spending those costs, right? If budget is the most important thing or a really limiting factor in your flight training path, then homework is absolutely the way to combat it.
Yeah, hopefully you have some kind of record, your previous training and parts that you're still working on, but not chair flying something is kind of a sure way to not stay in that mindset.
Increase the number of times you have to perform it with an instructor, which increase the cost, absolutely, yeah. Yeah,
that's a great way to bring down costs. Doing everything you can to prepare before you go into lesson. That means studying on your own, doing your homework, and taking it on yourself to ask for homework, because a lot of instructors don't assign formal homework every single day like it would be in a school. They say, work on this, or I think you could really help if you would study some of this material, but if you just take it upon yourself to kind of skim through a little bit ahead of your lessons and say, I need to work on this, this, and this, and just try to be organized with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had students also come and they say, look, I really want to learn how to fly. I don't want to do ground lessons, right? And at some point we have to do ground knowledge topics, right? Whether that occurs with an engine running or in the classroom, right? The cheapest way to do it is going to be in the classroom. So.
Yeah.
Something I thought of when you were talking about the homework, right? And asking as a student for homework from your instructor is the commitment level. I've had students who weren't really interested in pilot training, it seemed like at least. The commitment level was very low on lessons, on homework, on what am I doing outside of flight lessons. And maybe that's because somebody else really wanted this for them and is actually paying for it or things like that. But if the student's not very committed to the training, whether it's distractions going on in their life or maybe it wasn't their idea to pursue this path, definitely increases the cost of training because myself as the instructor is now shouldering all that load to keep them progressing and keep them motivated through the lessons, and I can't artificially create that or externally create that perfectly for a student. So it always seems to lend itself to more hours in the plane, more hours on the ground, usually especially more hours on the ground.
Right, yeah, at some point it's going to catch up to you.
Yeah. So another way to increase cost of training, I think, is switching instructors a lot. If you're not pleased with your instructor, of course you need to shop and get a new one.
Yeah.
But if it's just because your instructor said, I can't meet that day, I can meet on the day after, right? And you're like, well, I'm still gonna go that many times a week and fly with all these different instructors. It doesn't usually lend itself to as much progression as money you're spending. Is there progression? Yes. But are you spending more compared to like the steps you're taking forward than you would with your own instructor?
Absolutely.
Also, yes.
Yeah, your own instructor is always the best place for you to start. It's kind of plug and play, right? They know exactly where you are, they know your strengths and weaknesses, and they can just sit right next to you and get back to work. If it's a new instructor, there's no way to brief every single possible thing that's been good or bad in your training before that, and they're learning a lot of that along the way as you fly with them. So every flight you fly with that new instructor, it's like, you know, 3/4 them figuring out what's going on, and then 1/4 of new training or something like that, you know?
Do you think switching flight schools increases the cost of training generally?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good way to avoid that is to really do your homework again. To do your homework and shop around for a good flight school that's going to be a good fit, you know, for your budget, location, culture, everything that you should be looking at when you're shopping for a flight school.
Sure. Some training your instructor is legally required to do with you.
Right.
So let's say you're in private pilot training and you're approaching the solo milestone, right? Your instructor had to have done certain tasks with you that's required by the law before they could give you the endorsement or the privilege to go soloing. So let's say I switch flight schools right after that, or I switch instructors right after that. I might have to literally redo those things even if I was good at them, because the new instructor is legally required to do them before providing the next solo sign-off.
Right, exactly. I've seen that before, and I think that's a big source of frustration from a lot of students. They get a stamp in their logbook or an endorsement or whatever it may be, and they think, I can take this and run with it to any school and they're gonna sign me off for whatever I need to do, and it's not the case. It comes down to safety in the end. We don't know you. We don't know who gave you this certificate or an endorsement or whatever it may be, and we're gonna have to take a look at you either way. So it is another kind of example of taking 2 steps back to take 1 step forward.
Definitely. So that about wraps up today's video on the top ways to make your flight training more expensive. We hope it ends up saving you money and that you enjoyed today's video. If you have questions or comments, leave us a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos.
See you next time.